All right. She's visiting relatives in the United States and trying to teach herself stuff about miles. A kilometer is shorter than a mile. So it takes longer to run a mile than it would take to run a kilometer. She finds the following information. 1 kilometer is 0.6 of a mile. This one I find is easy to remember because when you're driving, you often drive 100 kilometers per hour, right? That on the highway. And you might know how much that is in miles per hour about. About 60 miles per hour is 100 kilometers an hour. So that means that 100 kilometers is about 60 miles. And if you divide both of those by 100, you get 1 kilometer is about 0.6 of a mile. One mile is about 1.6 kilometers. So if you run a mile, you've run about 1.6 kilometers. Those may be values that you want to memorize because they come in helpful. Because if you go to the United States and you have to do conversions, and they say it's about 3 miles, you're like, how far is that? Well, you could do 3 times 1.6 and say, oh, that's about 5 kilometers, and get an estimation that way. These are more accurate conversions. That 1 mile is approximately 1.609 kilometers, or 1 kilometer is about 0.6214. So here, 60 miles per hour, what is that approximately in kilometers per hour? We know that that one is approximately 100 kilometers per hour. But if we want to calculate it exactly, that's when we would set up our proportion. Okay, now when you set up your proportion, we want to find out how many kilometers is 60 miles. And since we have 2 things that she's researched here, and check them on your formula sheet, how similar are they to the ones that are on your formula sheet? You could use either one to calculate it. We could use the first one or the second one. If we use the first one, then we would put the 1.609 because we put kilometers on top and 1 mile on the bottom. If you use the other one, you would put 1 kilometer on the top and 0.6214 miles on the bottom. They're not quite the same answer. So for example, if I use this one and now I multiply by 60, I get that it is 96.54 kilometers. So if I would use that one, I would get that amount. If I would use the other one, how close is it? The other one gives me 96.56. So they're very close. And again, when you're doing a test or a quiz, whichever proportion you use to solve your question, as long as you're showing your work, both answers would be accepted for full marks. So near her home, the speed limit is 50 kilometers per hour. What is the equivalent in imperial units if we wanted to estimate? What would be a good way to estimate how much 50 kilometers per hour is? No? If we know that 100 kilometers per hour is approximately 60 miles per hour, and we cut 100 kilometers in half to get 50 kilometers an hour, we would get 30 miles per hour as our estimate. If we wanted to calculate it exactly, we want to find out how many miles are in 50 kilometers. We would then go to our conversion. We know that there is, put miles on top. Which one do you want to use, the first or the second one?
30.
Of these two. First one? Okay. So 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. multiply both sides by 50, and we get 31.1. So 31.1 miles per hour would be the equivalent, although when they put up signs for this, they'll never put up, sometimes you'll see places where they put up both 50 kilometers per hour and miles per hour, depending on where you are. Sometimes close to the border, they put both signs up. Okay? But when they would put both of these ones up, they would use 50 and 30 because they're both nice numbers. No one's going to be driving and looking, oh, am I going 31.1 miles per hour? No, you're looking at whole numbers. Okay, some for you to try. All right, let's see how you did. For an estimate, if you knew 100 kilometers per hour was about 60 miles per hour, here you might estimate it to be, because we're going down 10 miles per hour, maybe down to under 90, maybe 85 or something as our estimate. You don't need to show any work for your estimate. Maybe you did that kind of logic. Now, when you want to actually calculate it, I know they put spaces here, but you could just set up your proportion. I want to find out how many kilometers is 50 miles. I know from above that 1.609 kilometers was 1 mile. Or if you went to your formula sheet, it says 1.61. That would be fine as well. Multiply both sides by 50. And we get 80.45 or 80.5 if we round it. 80.5 kilometers. So 50 miles per hour would be about 80 kilometers per hour as far as proportion goes. The 90 kilometer per hour one, here now we're trying to find out miles. Woo! X miles is 90 kilometers. Again, what do we know? We know that 1 mile is 1.6 kilometers. 1.609, be more accurate. So we go times both sides by 90. And we get that's about 55.9 or approximately 56 miles. So the speed in miles per hour would be about 56 miles per hour.